Okay, so we've talked about some specific phonemic awareness assessments. Then we talked about how to use a student's dictated story as a way to assess beginning reading. Now we're going to talk about assessing basic word recognition skills. And we're specifically talking about the difference between flash and untimed word identification tests. So here's the rationale. Accurate, automatic recognition of printed words drives the reading process. This goes back to the very beginning of the class where we showed the diagram where we have one circle, and within that circle we have the mental capacity. And print processing at the very beginning stages of reading takes a lot of mental capacity. After a while, as the students become more automatic in their word recognition skills, that shrinks, and instead we have increased mental capacity to devote to comprehension. So having accurate, automatic recognition of words is very important to successfully reading. Word recognition can be assessed in context, and that would be when you ask the students to read a passage at the 3rd grade level and you count the number of words read correctly. So that would be assessing word recognition in context. But word recognition can also be assessed in isolation. Here's the example of that. The number of words read correctly on a 3rd grade word list. That would be assessing the number of words the students can read in isolation. But regardless of in context or in isolation, we want to know if students have good word recognition skills. Here's the general process when testing or assessing a student's word recognition skills in isolation. First, a child reads the graded list. Now, generally, we present graded lists at the primer or pre-primer level. It's okay to present to an older child a very beginning word list. This helps them to practice what you want them to do. It also helps to build their confidence. So we start at the very first list, and then we keep giving them lists until the child reaches his frustration level. This generally happens when the child misreads more than 50% of the words on a list. So we keep going until they're at their frustration level. The problem. Well, the problem with giving them a word list and letting them read down the word list is that it does address word recognition, but it does not address the crucial issue of automaticity, being able to automatically identify words. You know, back when you were learning the multiplication tables, you remember back that far? Well, some of us started out and we would have to figure out every single multiplication fact. 2 plus 3, and we'd have to think about it. 2 times 3, 4 times 3. But after a while, it became automatic, or hopefully it did, so that all we had to see is the fact and we knew the answer. We didn't have to do any kind of decoding or any kind of problem solving. That's what we want students to be able to do. We want them to be able to identify as many words as possible automatically. So here's how it generally works. Pre-primer. You start the test, and they get 100% on it. Then you go on to the primer level. They get 100%. First grade, 95%. Second grade, getting a little harder, 80%. Third grade, 70%. Fourth grade, they got 30%. It's time to stop the test. But we know what score they got, but we don't know from this information how long it took the student to read each word. Were they presented with the word and given as much time as they needed to figure the word out? Or were the words flashed to the student? So we've come up, or some other researchers have come up, with the flash untimed approach. In this approach, students are flashed words, but they're allowed to take extra time, as much time as they need, to figure out the words that they miss from the flash approach. Let me explain how it works. The examiner flashes a word at a student for 1/4 of a second. That's super short, but that's how fast we want them to be able to identify. Examiner keeps going, flashing the words to the student until the student makes a mistake. At this point, the examiner presents the missed word to the student again to allow the student to correct the error. The examiner marks the error on the flash column and waits for the student to recognize the word in an untimed presentation. So we flash, we flash, we flash. We get to a point where the student misses a word, so we stop. We present that word back to the student, and we give them time to try to determine the answer to that in an untimed presentation. Here's an example of a flashed and untimed word recognition test. This is level 1 and level 2. There are 20 words for level 1, 20 words for level 2. So you'll notice from this that the student must have identified words 1 and 2, no problem, in the flash test. But when the student got to word 3 in the flash test, instead of saying smile, they said smell. So the examiner stopped and presented the word again. And then in the untimed portion, the student said SME. And so the examiner wrote that response down, and then they continued going again. Now look at number 4. Number 4 has a +1 in it. The reason there's a +1 is the student missed that word on the flash presentation. But they got it right on the untimed presentation, so it's given a +1 there. And then we go down, all the way down the list, and you'll notice that for every word the student misses in the flash portion, they're given that word again and allowed extra time, or as much time as they need, to make another attempt. Now at the bottom, we have the percent correct for both the flash section and the untimed section. I could give you the formula for that, but essentially you count up the number that the student missed, you multiply that number times 5 because there's 20. 20 times 5 is 100, and we're trying to get a percentage. So the number they missed times 5, and then you take that number and subtract it from 100. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times 5 would be 35. Subtracted from 100 is not 60. Oh, they must have counted number 4. I'm sorry. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Times 5 is 40, subtract it from 100 is 60. And you do the same thing for the untimed. So what's the results? When reviewing a child's results, a flash score of 90 to 100 indicates an independent word recognition level. A flash score of 70 to 85 indicates an instructional level, and a flash score of 50 and below indicates a frustrational word recognition level. Side note. You know, these words that we want students to be able to recognize immediately. Well, a fine gentleman called Dolch came up with these words, and we call them the Dolch words. It's a list of 220 sight words that commonly occur in the English language and should be recognized by sight by fluent readers. In fact, it's been rumored that Dr. Seuss was challenged to write and illustrate a children's primer using only the 220 Dolch words, and the result was The Cat in the Hat. You can find all sorts of great websites about these words, and here are a few for you to explore. The first website I have here is the Dolch Online Games website. It's really pretty extensive. There are a whole bunch of different games you can use. And again, these games help students become automatic in those 220 words that Dolch determined. So let's see if we can pull this up to show you. Here it is. It says 50 to 70% of all words in text material are common sight words which are repeated. These 220 words are called the Dolch sight words. Because these Dolch sight words are used to hold thoughts together, these sight words must be recognized at a glance before a child can read with confidence. So there are many different games here. Let me see if I can just find one or so to show you. I was exploring this game, and it helps with spelling the Dolch words. And so let's look at list 1, the rain game. It says catch the raindrops, one from each row with the arrow keys as they fall, but in the right order to spell the Dolch word. Reach 500 and the rain will pass. Below 0 and you'll meet a watery end. So let's see if I can do this. Okay, what's the word? Oh, Y? So it's Y-O-U. Uh-oh, did I do it? Oh, you get the idea. So it's a fun little game. Let's go back and take a look at that other website that has some flashcards, I believe. And these might be handy for you to print out and have for extra practice. These are the Dolch pre-primer flashcards. There's 40 cards, and then it goes up each level. Primer, grade 1, grade 2, and then grade 3. And so these flashcards might be a great resource for you to print out, put onto cardstock, laminate, and then have for a good reference tool and assessment tool even for your students. So Dolch sight words, remember that term because you'll hear and see it often. And remember that we want students to be able to recognize words automatically in less than a quarter of a second.